And we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today. Welcome to this moment. And on the occasion of the Valentine's Day, the significant Valentine's Day, I invite you guys to have this conversation with yourself around what if your most intimate relationship was with you. And this conversation applies to you no matter what is it that you're doing in your life, how you're creating your life, whether you're creating a business, whether you're creating art, whether, your creation of your life and living in itself is a creative project. So this conversation is just for all of us here to look at a different way of being with ourselves, a different way of being in the world, a different way of creating our lives that includes us. In fact, isn't it ironic that it's your life, it starts with you, and if you truly look at it, in how many choices in your everyday life are you included truly? And what would it be like if you truly cultivated your relationship with yourself as your primary, most intimate, most important relationship of your life? Because isn't it isn't it so? Like, what's the point otherwise? A lot of today, as we're recording it live, it's the Valentine's Day, and I was going live in my Telegram group. We're doing like this challenge on being an infinite being you truly be, which is basically like when you look at that, when you look at this whole idea of an infinite being, even as I say it and frame the sentence like that, the idea of you as an infinite being, it's like, one of those esoteric spiritual conversations you might have had with yourself or might have heard people have out in the world. Maybe you indulged in it sometimes, maybe you dismissed it, but I've been really curious about it, and I'm really, really looking at how can this be something that is not just an idea, but something that we apply into our lives, in the creation of our living, in the creation of our financial realities, in the creation of the most beautiful relationships we can have, starting with ourselves? So, when I titled this live, What If Your Most Intimate Relationship Was with You? The first thing that I want to highlight here for you guys is, what have you defined you as? So when I say, what if your most intimate relationship was with you? What comes up for you? Who are we talking about? Who's this you that we're talking about? How much of you is actually a definition of what you have decided you can, what you have decided you cannot, the roles that you associate yourself with, the different titles that you have, the different relationships, and you in context to them in your life. You as a business owner, you as a homemaker, you as a wife, a daughter, a son, a husband, a spouse, a da 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 da. How many definitions and roles do you have in your life? And how much are you defining them as you? And what else is possible? What is a different way of being in which you are included, and all these roles and all these people and all these different hats that you wear in your life are included, but you never get to lose a perspective on, a presence with you? So, as we have this conversation today, what I invite you to is to look at, when we saying, what if your most intimate relationship was with you? What if you were willing to undefine whatever that you is for you and be willing to just be curious for a second? What if you truly are an infinite being? What if you truly are an infinite being who has infinite capacities, who has infinite gifts, who's infinitely aware of so many possibilities that you want to create your life as, in and through your business, in and through your relationships, in and through just how you show up in the world? So, when we're looking at what if your most intimate relationship was with you, my invitation to you is to look at that being as something, the intimate relationship that you have with you as an infinite being. Okay? I know it's kind of like a big thing, and I'm really inviting you guys to pull that thing in rather than have infinite being be like a concept, an idea. Really be curious for a second. What if you truly are an infinite being? Having this experience, choosing this embodiment, choosing this lifetime to create what you're here to create in the world. And so, if that was your point of view, if your point of view was an infinite being point of view, what would it be like to cultivate intimacy with you as an infinite being? So, there are essentially five elements that are required to create intimacy. And when I say intimacy, also notice what comes up for you. Intimacy is not like a lot of times when we talk about intimacy in the world, it could be understood from a like a physical intimacy kind of a space. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about like true intimacy, true communion that you get to have with yourself. And from that communion with yourself, you get to have that communion, that intimacy with everything else in the world too. But it always starts with you. And there are five elements that are required to create that intimacy. And those five elements are not independent of each other, they kind of go together, they go hand in hand. The five elements of intimacy are honoring, trust, vulnerability, gratitude, and allowance. And I want to talk about this, all of these five elements with you, and from a perspective of having that intimate relationship with yourself as an infinite being, right? Because even just look at it, if you're not an infinite being, what are you? A finite being? Does that resonate with you? Do you think you're finite? Probably not, right? What are you capable of? What are your infinite capacities? What are your infinite gifts that you are here to share with the world? That's what I'm interested in talking to you guys about. So, we're looking at cultivating this intimate relationship with you as that infinite, magnanimous, amazing being that you truly be. And first element that I would like to start talking about is honoring. Honoring is such an incredibly fundamental element that you require to have with you. Are you honoring yourself in your life? Are you honoring yourself in the choices you're making in your everyday life? Or are you being distracted by the noise in the world? Are you being distracted by your awareness of everything else that's going on around you? I don't know if you've noticed, but if you're listening to this conversation, chances are you are an aware being. Like, what do I mean by that? It's something as simple as how aware are you of everybody else's expectations of you? How aware are you of everybody else's judgments around you? And how many times do you get lost in that space? What else is possible? What would it take to not get lost in that space? And one of the things that is required to not get lost in that space is for you to cultivate presence with these elements that I'm talking about, essentially, like cultivate presence with what is it like to honor you? What would be an honoring of you? And once again, I want to highlight here when I say you, I'm not talking about the definitions you have of you. I'm not talking about all the ways in which you've judged yourself in negative ways, but also in positive ways. A lot of times, the judgments that we have of ourselves are they look very positive on the surface, but a positive judgment is also a judgment and is also a limitation. And I'll tell you how. Because what if you are way greater than even that? What if you are way greater, way more capable than whatever you have positively already judged yourself as? And that's one of the things that's tricky about positive judgments because when you're negatively judging yourself, you can still identify it and you might want to or you might have a desire to change that. But the positive judgments are the ones that we have just so beautifully concluded about ourselves and they sound good. So we never really question them. What if you are way more capable, way more greater than that? So if you are judging yourself to be a particular way, no matter if it is positive or negative, are you truly honoring you? Are you truly honoring your infinite capacity, you as an infinite being? So honoring you is one of the elements of intimacy with yourself. You've got to be on to your this con you've got to be on with yourself with this conversation. You've got to ask yourself, am I honoring myself with this choice that I'm making? Is this choice an honoring of me? For example, a lot of times, an example I like to share, this is one of the ways in which I've used this awareness with myself, is a lot of times when I would wake up in the morning, I like, I have my body has a really good clock, like, it will wake up without alarm pretty early in the morning, and then what I used to do is I would look at the time and I'd be like, "Ah, it's too early, let's just sleep again." There was no question asked, I would just conclude, and from that space of conclusion, I just sleep again. And then at one point, I was looking at this piece of honoring, and I looked at this. Am I truly honoring myself with that? Am I honoring my body? Because I haven't even asked a question. Hey, body, like, are you done? Are we rested? Are we ready to go for the day? Do you want to wake up? What else is possible? What can we do right now? What can we create? Like, I just would never ask those questions. I would just be like, ah, it's 5:30 in the morning. Let's sleep. But true honoring can be like these little ways in which we ask ourselves, is this choice truly honoring me? Or am I being reactive to something? Or am I operating from judgment or conclusion? That's one piece. Another piece that kind of goes together with honoring is also allowance. Allowances, again, where you're not judging you. Anytime you are in judgment of you, you're not truly in allowance, are you? Allowance is the space where everything is included, nothing is judged. So, how many places in your life, in the creation of your life, in how many spaces and how many times do you find yourself judging you? And in that place, are you honoring you? Are you in allowance of you? Are you cultivating intimacy with you? Or are you cultivating judgment? And the purpose of this conversation, this exploration, this thing that we're talking about is not to judge yourself for that now. The target here is to be more aware of how can you cultivate intimacy with yourself? How can you show up as this person who is really just full of themselves in the most beautiful ways, who is just full of energy and enthusiasm for having this day to live, for the creations they get to create in their life and in the world. So, honoring and allowance, two really important pieces. Another piece or another element to cultivate intimate relationship with yourself is trust in you. And trusting is typically in the world, when we talk about trust, it has a connotation of blind faith in it. So it's kind of like, if you did not do it right, you lost my trust. That's one way to look at it. When we're looking at creating intimacy, that's not what we call trust here. That's called judgment. That's called conditional love, or whatever you want to call it. And so that's not what we're talking about. The trust that I'm talking about here, when I say cultivating trust in you, it's not about beating yourself up to do something. It's about, in fact, the opposite. It's about lowering all your walls and barriers, all your judgments you have of you, all the ways in which you are harsh on yourself, lowering all that down. When you're truly trusting you, that includes wherever you are in a given moment without any judgment, too. So trusting you is kind of like, in a way that I'm about to introduce you to, the whole concept is a little bit counterintuitive and really does require you to stretch beyond your current definitions and current ways of living and operating. But look at this for a second. What if trust was all about trusting and knowing that you're going to choose what you're going to choose until you choose it, and you will change it when you change it? It can be unsettling to look at that, to give yourself that level of space and freedom where you're not judging yourself for any of your choices. So if you're not showing up the way you would like to, you don't judge yourself for it, but you can trust it about you that you are, yesterday you didn't show up like that. Maybe today you will not show up like that too. Maybe tomorrow again you will not show up in a way that you would like to. But having no judgment, what if you could just trust that about you and give yourself to be in the space that you are in without any judgment? Would an infinite being choose something that doesn't work for it or something else? If you allowed yourself the gift of trust in you, the gift of vulnerability with you, which is also one of the five elements, is vulnerability, wherein you stand up like without any walls and barriers, kind of like being naked to yourself, wherein you, instead of judging yourself to change something, there's a different way in which you trust that you are going to choose what actually works for you. Do you trust this about you? That when you show up, when you allow yourself to show up as an infinite being, that you will choose what works for you? Or is that a place where you judge yourself? Or do you have a point of view that I need to be harsh on myself, that I need to, judge myself into changing this, right? Like beat the crap out of myself until I change it, use force and effort to change things. That's one way to be. I'm not saying that doesn't work. In some capacity, in some ways it does. But is that the kind of energy you would like to have in your life? Or are you looking for something different? Because if you're looking for something different, if you're looking to create an intimate relationship with yourself, if you're looking to cultivate intimacy with yourself, it requires you to kind of let go of all these ways in which you've been functioning so far that are so harsh on you. What if no force was necessary? What if you actually, when you allowed yourself to be you, when you actually allowed yourself to drop all judgments of you and actually give yourself the gift of total allowance with yourself, no matter what you're choosing? What if you would naturally just choose something different that does work for you? But we don't have these conversations because we're so busy judging ourselves because we've already concluded that the way we're showing up or that thing that's not working for us is so wrong. It's the thing that's the most wrong about us. But what I'm actually inviting you to see here and explore with yourself is, what if it's not wrong? What if it's just a choice you're making? And what if you can just easily stop making that choice, not by force or effort, but from that space of true intimacy with yourself, where you're intimately, vulnerably asking yourself questions like, cool, so if I were an infinite being, would I make this choice? Or would I make a different choice? What choice do I have available? What have I not even considered? What space is available for me to choose and create from? What allowance can I be of all my choices? What if none of this was wrong? What if no matter how bad you think it looks, it's always just guiding you forward to a different way of being where no judgment was necessary? Like, have you ever seen a tree judge itself? Do you ever perceive the energy of judgment or force in nature? Where have we separated ourselves from the nature that we truly be? And so when we're talking about cultivating intimacy with yourself, what if your most intimate relationship was with you? And when I'm saying this, I'm not just talking about as this good spiritual idea where you meditate, take care of yourself, and then you get to work. What I'm talking about is, what if we melt these separations and actually show up as this energy, practice showing up as this energy, move towards showing up as this energy in every area of your life, in creation of our businesses, in our jobs, in parenting. Like, what if in your everyday life and living, you invited yourself to have these different conversations with you, to have these different perspectives that would allow you to look at, how is it that you want to live? And what's actually possible, pragmatically possible, absolutely possible, if you were to engage with it. So trusting you is not about beating yourself up. Trusting you is not about deciding this is how I'm going to show up. So in order to cultivate trust in me, I have to show up like this now. That's not what it is at all. Counterintuitive, isn't it? Trusting you is about, okay, this is how I would like to show up. This is how I am showing up. Cool. I am going to continue showing up like this until I stop this and actually start showing up like this, and however that journey looks like. And you're not being passive. In fact, you're being very actively engaged, very actively involved, very actively you are asking questions with yourself, very actively you are engaging with everything in your life. You're not being passive, you're not condoning anything. It's just a different way of being, wherein you stop judging you for anything and just creating more space in your everyday life for you to show up. The thing is that most of us have been so long abused in our lives because most of everything in our world right now is about judgment. is about the right and wrong, navigating through that. We were taught to navigate through the polarity of right and wrong. Once again, nothing in nature functions like that. It's just somewhere we learned that as if that is the right way to be. But the thing with that is, as long as we're in that polarity, there's going to be judgment. And what we're talking about, intimacy with yourself, requires you to give up judgment. It requires you to move beyond judgment. So, what else is possible? Honoring yourself, cultivating allowance with yourself, cultivating trust in you, not the judgmental trust, but true trust of melting, the true trust that allows vulnerability. In fact, it requires vulnerability, which is another element, wherein you're willing to be with what is, warts and all. Nothing is wrong. Like consciousness includes everything, judges nothing. You are included in consciousness. If you would like to create more in communion with yourself, if you would like to create more as nature, if you would like to invite more energies of peace and ease and joy in the creation of your living, in the creation of your businesses, in the creation of your relationships and parenting, whatnot, any area of your life, if you would like to have more peace, more calm, if you'd like to show up as a different energy in your world, if you've always had that sense of something else must be available, then you've got to start following that journey, following that whisper, and start applying these energies, these principles, these elements into creation of your life. Vulnerability is kind of like being an open wound. It kind of hurts, but it's also healing. It depends on the point of view that you take. Vulnerability actually looks like, if I'm judging myself for something, vulnerability looks like lowering my walls and barriers and just being present for a second with that. That, oh my God, this is my judgment of me. It takes enormous amount of vulnerability to cultivate intimate relationship with yourself. And the final element of intimacy is gratitude. And the cool thing about gratitude is what? That it cannot coexist with judgment. Gratitude and judgment cannot go together. If you're judging something, you're not in great gratitude for it, you're not grateful for it. If you're truly grateful for something, there is no judgment. Everything is included. Gratitude is the same energy where everything is included, nothing is judged. You, no matter what's going on, you can still have gratitude. You can have gratitude as a way of being. So what if we took that inwards? What can you be grateful for you? How tenacious are you? No matter how fucked up you think you are, how tenacious are you that you're here today? Can you be grateful for that? How different are you? Have you ever felt like you don't fit in? And how much have you judged yourself for that? Now, if that was the difference of you was not wrong, if all those things in which you cannot, if your life depended on it, you cannot do it, if none of that was wrong, and if you really allowed yourself to have the space of being with yourself, then what else is possible? What can you be grateful for about you? What if you could be grateful for about that difference you be in the world? So when it comes to creating or cultivating, because it's more about cultivating, it's an everyday choice, a moment by moment choice that you made, wherein you cultivate an intimate relationship with yourself in creation of your life, in creation of your living, in creation of your businesses, your relationships, creation of whatever it is that you'd like to create in and as your life every day, as your future. These are the elements that you require in order to have an intimate relationship with you, so that you, not the definition of you, not the conclusion of you, not what you think you can and cannot do, but you truly, as an infinite being, what you're capable of, what you chose this embodiment for. What are the ways in which that can show up more in the world? And from my point of view, from where I see it, these elements of intimacy with yourself are so crucial in creating a life, to me, a life worth living, honestly. Because if I'm judging myself all the time, beating the crap out of myself, if I don't have time, if I'm in urgency all the time, is that life worth living for me? It's not. It's not. What is life worth living for you? What makes you want to come alive? What makes you feel the exuberance of living, the exuberance of being on this beautiful planet, warts and all? What makes you come alive? And what brings the gift of you to the world? What if having an intimate relationship with you was the beginning? Would you be willing to choose that for you, with you? Would you be willing to be courageous enough, vulnerable enough to allow yourself to be for once, dropping all judgments? And from that space, look at what would you like to create in your life and in the world. What else is possible, my friend? What different way of being and creating is available, is practical, is pragmatic, not just a good idea? What ways can you bring that which you've kept outside of you inwards in your everyday life and living, in creation of your life, in creation of your living, in creation of your businesses, your relationship, and whatnot? All right, my friend, that's my invitation for you today. Happy Valentine's. What if you could be your most intimate relationship in your life? I wonder what that will create for you. I wonder what that will create in the world through you. Looking forward to another conversation with you sometime. Thank you for joining me today. Bye bye.